With Resident Evil 7 just around the corner and me being an absolute fan of the Resident Evil franchise, I thought I'd take the time and make a list compiling some of the unfinished and unreleased titles of the series that popularized the survival horror genre, in no particular order. Number 5. Resident Evil on Game Boy Color. This one is pretty interesting considering just how absurd the whole idea is. It's a full port of the original Resident Evil on Game Boy. Now, while this system would get a Resident Evil title with Gaiden, this version was developed earlier and wasn't a spin-off that took liberties to fully adapt the experience on the portable console. Resident Evil Gaiden was an original game with a top-down and first-person view, with an original story featuring Leon. This port was actually going to have the cinematic camera angles and the same full story from the original PlayStation 1 game. It's not a surprise as to why Capcom would turn it down. Just from the footage and screenshots shown, the limited color range of the Game Boy would definitely ruin the experience for some, although I'm pretty sure that some hardcore fans would still enjoy the game. Number 4. Biohazard 4. This game is a funny one. The final product of arguably the most popular entry of the franchise, Resident Evil 4 marked a drastic change of pace for the series. This was definitely the product of its erratic development schedule, which had many revisions, which I might actually cover in another video. So instead we're going to talk about the original Biohazard 4 that would be the seed for another Capcom franchise, Devil May Cry. How is this connection possible? Enter Hideki Kamiya, who's notable for two things, directing Resident Evil 2 and blocking many people on Twitter, with myself included. This guy would provide the basics for the original draft of Resident Evil 4, which had his team go out to Spain for references to the area. Now the story focused not on Leon, but an original character, Tony Redgrave. You're apparently one of the two sons of Lord Spencer, with you fighting your twin brother, and both of y'all are infected with the G-Virus. Now, Kamiya would inspire the usage of a dynamic camera system and a more gunslinging combat system, freeing the franchise from the trademarked fixed camera angles and tank controls. Eventually, while in development, they found that the direction the game was going in wasn't that of Resident Evil, but something entirely new. The game would then spawn Devil May Cry, and now that's probably why I have a sticker of Devil May Cry on my copy of Code Veronica. Interestingly, in Resident Evil 3 Nemesis, an Easter egg can be found that contains a promotion for this version of Resident Evil 4. Number 3. Resident Evil on PSP. In 2009, Capcom announced at E3 of a new Resident Evil title on the PSP format. They remarked that it would bring the franchise into a new direction that would go where no game has gone before. Since then, we haven't heard anything about it, so we can presume that wherever direction it was going, it got lost. Yeah. Number 2. Resident Evil 0 on Nintendo 64. Resident Evil 0 was released on 2002 for the GameCube, but it seems that the idea for a prequel that starts before the events of Spencer Mansion had been floating around for some time. This is seen in the original version of Resident Evil 0. Unveiled at the Tokyo Game Show, it was set originally for an early 2000 release date for the Nintendo 64 platform. Ultimately, while in development, Capcom found that the game was to be limited by the Nintendo 64 system capability, and opted to wait instead for Dolphin, the GameCube's SDK, to move everything and continue on from there. However, they found that everything wasn't compatible, and instead decided to restart everything from scratch, resulting in the final product that we have today. Number 1. Resident Evil 1.5. Resident Evil 1.5 was to bridge the gap between the fall of Spencer Mansion and the total collapse of Raccoon City. It was near completion in 1997 before developers found themselves dissatisfied with the title and opted to start over from scratch. This would opt for the release of the infamous Resident Evil Director's Cut to hold fans over. 1.5, however, still shares a lot of similarities to the final product. Leon was still present throughout all this, and his side seems not to be affected as much as his counterpart, Elza Walker. Elza was the original female lead for Resident Evil 2, and instead of Claire's goal of looking for her brother, Elza rolls into Raccoon City to enroll in the city's college. Okay. There's plenty of differences, major and minor, in comparison to 1.5 and Resident Evil 2. For example, the actual Raccoon City Police Department actually looks more detailed and modern in here than how it appears in the final game.